Good evening, everyone. My understanding is that we've got quite a few international guests for this webinar. So hello to everyone, wherever you are. My name is Soren Kruse Ledet. I am a mountain guide for World Expeditions and have been a guide internationally for the past almost 25 years. So I've guided extensively in the Nepal Himalaya, in Bhutan, in Karakoram, in Pakistan, Central Asia, and Kyrgyzstan, and Patagonia in South America. The webinar tonight is all about anything to do with introduction to mountaineering, and I'll be going through a few different kind of trips that we offer, and some suggestions to you all. And I'll welcome any questions at the end of the presentation. So just there we are. So where to begin? So I think it's fair to assume that that most people who join a mountaineering trip would have been on a trek or have had some sort of altitude experience prior. It's not always necessary, but I would say more than 90% of people who join a mountaineering trip have been at altitude, have done a trek somewhere in the Himalayas or in other parts of the world. It's a progressive nature, so you think, well, I've done a trek, I've crossed some high passes, I wouldn't mind actually climbing a peak, and so you start that journey. But I guess first things first. So I think regardless of the trip that you're doing, being as fit as you possibly can will make life a lot easier for yourself. So obviously, if you have been on a trek and if the training you did for that particular trek, if that worked well, I will probably sort of increase that by 10, 15, 20% for a mountaineering trip. But bottom line is mix up your training. So try and not do the same exercise every day when you're out, but mix it up. So do some bike riding, do some swimming, some jogging. Of course, one of the best things you can do will be a bushwalk, carrying a heavy pack. So carrying more than you will carry on any given day on a trek. You might like to go to the climbing gym. If you have a rowing machine, or if there is a rowing machine in the gym, I would use that. Lots of stairs. Try and do about 4 to 5 sessions per week, and try and focus on stamina and endurance. And of course, your mental fitness is key for mountaineering trips. I feel, because so much of what you do is it's psychologically challenging. And particularly on summit days. So you might train for, I don't know, an average day of between 6 to 8 hour, walking. Summit day is most likely going to be a lot longer. So how do you perform after 8, 9, 10 hours? So you kind of want to have maybe have an overnight experience as part of your training regime. But bottom line, try and be as fit as you possibly can. So I'll be talking a little bit about a few different kind of trips. But as far as introduction to mountaineering, I think if you're living in Sydney, or near Sydney, or the east coast of Australia, then we offer mountaineering training or refresher courses in the Blue Mountains. We have a mountaineering course in Nepal, which is sort of focused on teaching specifically. We have several standalone climbing trips. There's Mera Peak, Mera and Island Peak, Cholo, Twin Peaks of Ladakh, and then the stage 2 of the GHT. And all of those trips I would consider as being introductory to mountaineering. But let's start with the Blue Mountains. So there's a gentleman joining me on the Cholatse trip, which is the peak behind me here. This coming October. It's been several years since he's been doing anything to do with mountaineering. So he's coming up for a day here in the Blue Mountains, where I live, west of Sydney, and I'll set up a circuit, a course for him, and it might involve ascending and descending static lines. It might be using a variety of techniques. We might practice some abseiling with top belay, maybe with self belay as well. But basically, for him, it's a refresher course. If you are looking at this as a completely new thing, then I can also arrange a course for you that is appropriate for what you are trying to do. So it doesn't have to be something as extreme looking as the mountain climbing. In this particular image, it can be a lot more low key. But basically, the point is that you learn all the appropriate skills and before you go on a mountaineering trip. And it's really good to kind of have an understanding of the various techniques that we'll be using on our climbing trips in the Himalayas. Then if you want to sort of have a higher level of self-sufficiency, if you really want to learn more about how to build anchors, for instance, if you want to learn more about, say, ice climbing and rock climbing specifically, how to put in snow anchors, then this course is for you. So we run this every March. We run it in the Rawaling Valley, which is just west of the Everest National Park. And it's about a 25-day course, and it's hands-on. So this sort of is a little graph that gives you an idea of the time that we're going to spend at Nar, which is a small yak Kaka summer settlement at about 4,000 meters. So we'll be doing the majority of training there. And you'll be learning a variety of techniques. It's all about, reinforcing all those learnings, and you get to practice the various techniques over and over and over again. There are no exams, of course, on this trip. We do have a little climbing manual that's sort of specific to this course, and can be used as a reference source for all the things that we do on the course. The things that we will practice will be things like self-rescue, like what Jason is doing in the video, how to build rock anchors. We might practice, or we will practice abseiling, abseiling with self-belay.
So giving a test on the rock a little bit further down.
Abseiling with top belay as well. And a variety of other techniques, and it's a really good way to build confidence. You may not want to explore the big peaks in the Himalayas. You might be like Jason, who just wants to be able to take his family out on trips in northern Canada and be safe, basically. On the course that we did this past March, the ice was fantastic. So we were able to do some quite incredible ice climbing at lower altitude, around about 4,000 meters. If depending on conditions, that may not work every year, but there are glaciers higher up that we use as a plan B. The beauty of this course is that at the end of it, you actually get to climb a 6,000 meter peak. So you get to utilize all your newfound skills to climb a 6,000 meter mountain in the Himalayas. So that is, it's good fun. Great trip. So on all our climbing trips, World Expedition Supply, kit bag, sleeping bag, down jackets, and a variety of gear, you are, of course, welcome to bring all that equipment yourself, but we can supply all the stuff on that list. What you do have to bring are some specific hardware items, and the list is trip specific. So things like carabiners, a Juma and a sender, a variety of cords, a figure eight, abseiling or belay device. and then double boots. So double boots are critical for any trip, any altitude trip above 6,000 meters in the Himalayas. You can bring them, of course, from home. If it is your first expedition, a lot of people then hire the boots in Kathmandu, and there's a variety of boots that are available there for hire. So, but we will supply you and give you a very detailed PDI list of what equipment, what clothing that you are required to bring for the trip that you choose. On all our expeditions, it can be a trek, it can be a climbing expedition. We are completely self-sufficient, so we bring everything that we need from start to finish. If you are trekking in the Annapurna region, if you're climbing in the Annapurna region, if you are in the Everest region, you will be staying in some of our semi-permanent campsites. So they're private campsites, so we don't stay in lodges. Sometimes we have to stay in lodges if at above a certain altitude, but we will to a large degree, as in 90% of the time, stay in our own permanent campsites in the Everest and Annapurna region. We pride ourselves on our acclimatization itinerary, and so we try as much as possible to get off the beaten track. We never force the itinerary schedule, and we don't push people over high passes, and try and really focus on getting the acclimatization right for everyone. And that's regardless of your background or experience, because you could have been in the Himalayas on multiple trips, but that doesn't mean that you can't get sick. So you just have to be respectful of the environment that you're in. We have lots of rest days, acclimatization days, where we try and get as much altitude under our belts as possible before we sort of hit the bigger mountains. So this is true for all our expeditions. So regardless of your experience level, whenever we get to base camp of a particular peak, this one in the video, that's Mera Peak, we always have a training session. And this is just to ensure that everyone's on the same page, that we all use the same techniques. So you will be taught about 4 or 5 different knots and some different techniques to safely ascend and descend static ropes, and how to travel on roped up on a glacier, for instance. So all that training will be done before we set foot on the mountain, regardless of the peak. It can be an introductory peak. It can be a more challenging peak like the one I'm doing this October. The basic training is all the same. So another refresher course, in other words. So one of the before we go anywhere, so the 3 rules of mountaineering are, of course, it's always further than it looks, it's always taller than it looks, and it's always harder than it looks. And so that, of course, is just so that you can always prepare yourself mentally for the challenge that's ahead. So never, ever underestimate a mountain in the Himalayas. It will most likely be a hard undertaking, but it's absolutely worthwhile, but just never underestimate it. So one of the classic introductory peaks in our program is Mera Peak. So Mera Peak is sort of south of a little bit south of the main Himalayan range, south of the Everest National Park. The approach walk is fantastic. So we sort of get off the beaten track before we get to Mera Peak base camp, and you don't really get a good sense of where you're at until you sort of walk from base camp, which is down the bottom left, up onto the glacier, and you head up to high camp, and then the scenery really opens up. And the beauty of Mera Peak is it's quite a tall mountain. It's just under 6,500 meters, but it's technically straightforward. So there's a lot of easy angled walking on a huge glacier. But as I mentioned before, the peak is south of the main range. So once you get up onto the glacier, you get that sense of the panorama unfolding to your north. And on a clear day, you'll be able to see 8,000 meter peaks, including Choyu, Everest, Lhotse, Makalu, and Kanchenjunga. So for this particular mountain, we move up the glacier. There will be crevasses. We may decide to rope up. We don't always, but I guess it depends on conditions. But we will then make our way up to high camp. And from high camp that's where we summit from. So high camp on Mera Peak is about 5,850 or so meters. It'll be an early, it'll be a really early start. We call it an alpine start. So you'll be going to bed quite early. We won't be bringing up our dining tent. You'll be having your meal in your tent. So you may not feel like eating due to altitude, but you'll be warm and you'll be well hydrated, and that's kind of really important. So off to bed early, and we try and get up by maybe, depends a bit, by 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then we try and leave within an hour and a half. And then, so you'll be climbing up in the dark, and it's all about all these little prompts you're seeing here. Your world is sort of reduced to the light from your head torch as you walk across the glacier and slowly head up. So from high camp to the summit, it's about 600-700 vertical meters. So it takes about an hour or so per 100 vertical meters approximately. And then hopefully the sunrise that we experience will be a nice sunrise. Hopefully there'll be no wind. And then you end up on the summit, and the views really are glorious. The only technical part on Mera Peak is the last 20 or 30 meters where it's a little bit exposed, and so we'll definitely put in a static rope for you to use at that point. But the views from the summit up are outstanding. So Mera can be a standalone expedition, or if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous, you can add on Island Peak as well. So Mera and Island Peak are the two most popular of all the trekking peaks in Nepal. To get to Island Peak, you have to cross into a separate valley, and you cross over the Amphalapsa Pass. So Island Peak is probably the most popular of all the trekking peaks in Nepal. And you can see in the bottom left-hand image is a little bit steeper, and there's a more rope work involved. The crossing of the Amphalapsa Pass is also sort of a little bit of a step up, but we feel that the Mera as a standalone, or the combination of these two peaks and the pass, is absolutely within the capabilities of most first-time mountaineers. So, and really nice circuit. So you finish trekking down through the Everest National Park. The other mountain is a small peak, also in the Everest National Park, called Cholo. So we've been going there almost every year since 2016, and it's an outstanding mountain. Probably a little bit similar to Island Peak in terms of difficulty. Right in the middle of the Everest National Park. Lovely approach walk. You fly into Lukla, you trek up to Namche, and then you sort of go in a clockwise direction over the Ranger La, and you get a phenomenal view from the Ranger La of Everest and Lhotse and a variety of big Himalayan peaks. Cholo despite its proximity to one of the busiest sort of trails in the Himalayas, we've never come across any other groups on Cholo. And so that's one of the reasons we keep going back there. But it's an absolutely outstanding objective. Beautiful high camp on the saddle between Cholo and Kangchung, and then a nice sort of steepish ascent up the northeast face. I'm sorry, and then as the higher you get, the better the view is, and it really opens up, and you can see the North Col, the South Col, and you have phenomenal views of all the peaks and all the valleys and almost all the passes in the Everest National Park. It's a beauty of a trip. And then I don't have any images from this particular trip, but the GHT, of course, is the Great Himalaya Trail. Stage 2 it takes you up past Makalu and over Shipani Col and West Col. So it's sort of where trekking meets mountaineering. So you're not actually climbing a mountain, but you are crossing two high passes or cols. Both are higher than 6,100 meters. But again, it's a trip that is suitable for first time or would be mountaineers, or as an introductory sort of climbing trip. It's a wonderful trek. I'll be leading it in September, October next year as part of our the 50th anniversary for World X. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't been back there since 2013, so it's always exciting to return to a place that I haven't been to for a while. And it's a wonderful part of the world. It's remote, and you travel in between Makalu, one of the 8,000-meter peaks, and the Everest National Park, and you cross over these incredible high passes, the Shipani Col, West Col, and then the Amphalapsa. It's a fabulous trip. And then, of course, actually, Heather Hawkins, who completed the GHT in 2016, I think it was, with her family. She'll be doing a talk specifically on the GHT next week if you want to listen in and find out some more information about the whole GHT from end to end, or more information about this particular trip in specifically. Then the other trip that you should consider if you are looking at introductory mountaineering would be the Twin Peaks of Ladakh in India. Close to 6,200 meters. No technical climbing on either of those two peaks, and fabulous views of the Karakoram range further to the west. So that sort of is it in terms of sort of introductory climbing trips. So Brad, I don't know if you are open to questions.
We're just waiting for a question to pop up. If anyone has any questions, there is a Q&A button in your toolbar, and now's a good time to ask Soren. I double checked and I have clicked the button so people can ask.
Yep.
Here we go. Here they come.
Oh. So I have a question here. What is my favorite trip ever? I don't know. There's been quite a few. Look, I think this particular trip, the trip behind me, was a trip that we to Cholatse, which we did in 2016, was pretty amazing. So that's when we climbed Cholo for the first time, and then we climbed Cholatse afterwards. And we were actually going back to to Cholatse this coming October. In fact, we had a cancellation only 2 days ago. So if any of you are interested and feel you might be up for a little bit more of a serious expedition, then please, by all means, come and join me on Cholatse. There's a question here from Rolf. Any age limitations? No, not necessarily. I mean, we might ask some questions if you are sort of in your late 60s or early 70s, but no, not necessarily. Lisa asks, how long do I need to train before attempting a climb? I think I would probably start 4 or 5 months out, and then, you know, ramp up your training, and then 2 weeks or 3 weeks before departure, I would start to taper off. And there's a question here from Amar. In terms of physical health, would putting on some muscle and coming heavier on a trek is better, or is it better to be lighter or leaner? I'm pretty lean. I think it depends a little bit on the trip that you're doing. If you're doing, say, Everest, I think it probably is not a bad idea to because you will lose a lot of weight. But I would say, you know, if you can put on about, you know, maybe 4 or 5 kilos, I think, and that would probably be okay. But I don't think you need to be super heavy. Just be as aerobically fit as you possibly can be.
Okay, Soren. Well, you might get a bit of an early mark tonight as
Okay.
withdraw the questions, but just a reminder for anyone, if you think of a good question or any question just after we all close the webinar, feel free to contact the office. We can get in touch with Soren. If there's one more question, we'll make it the lucky last one, Soren.
Yeah, sure. No, yeah. So in terms of walking, trekking volume, what would you say is a reasonable distance to be training weekly in a lead up to a trip to somewhere like Mera Peak? That's a tricky question to answer. I would say probably, I mean, if you can go out for a walk and you can go for 10, 12 Ks on each outing, and assuming you do 4, maybe 5 walks, so, you know, 40, 50 kilometers per week would be reasonable. Yep.
Okay, so just a reminder, if anyone did join late, there will be a link of the recording sent tomorrow, and you can get in touch with Soren via our office. 2 more questions, Soren. Sorry.
That's all good. So firstly, there's do I have a schedule on the Blue Mountains intro? No, I mean, I think that's something that we can sort of organize on a one-to-one basis. So I would reach out and we can maybe arrange something. That would be the easiest way to do that. And then Regan, you think of doing Cholatse in October. How fit do I need to be? Well, as fit as you possibly can be. So if I'm assuming that you've been to altitude before. So whatever training you did for that particular trip, I would certainly copy that and then increase it by maybe 20% or so. And yeah,